Alright, what's going on, guys? Today, we're going to take a look at another World Championship winning deck in Magic the Gathering's history. And this time, it's going to be the deck that won the World Championship in 1999, Wildfire, a deck that broke the symmetry of a board wipe spell so that it would leave its opponents completely defenseless. So, the 1999 World Championship would take place in Yokohama, Japan, and the deck would be piloted by Budde. Standard at the time was composed of the Tempest block, also known as the Wrath cycle, the Urza block, also known as the Artifact cycle, and the 6th edition starter set. So, Wildfire was built around the deck's namesake, Wildfire. It's a 6-mana sorcery that forces each player to sacrifice 4 lands and then deals 4 damage to each creature in play. This seems like a fair card. It punishes each player equally, basically resetting the game by wiping the board of creatures and resources. So totally fair, except this deck didn't play fair. Okay, so for starters, it played a ton of mana rocks. 4 Therian Dynamos, 4 Grim Monoliths, 2 Worn Power Stones, and 4 Fire Diamonds. There's a lot of text to read here, but the important thing is that they are simply mana rocks. They just ramp you into more mana faster. Therian Dynamo and Grim Monolith both produce 3 mana, but the Monolith doesn't untap unless you pay mana to untap it. The Power Stone adds 2 but comes into play tapped, and Diamond also comes into play tapped but adds 1 red mana. What made these cards even more powerful was the inclusion of Voltaic Key. Voltaic Key simply allows you to pay 1 and tap it to untap an artifact. This thing gets crazy with these mana rocks. Imagine playing a Grim Monolith, you tap it to add 3, you use one of those to activate the key, to untap Monolith and tap it again for another 3, giving you 5 mana, which allows you to cast Therian Dynamo with 1 floating. Then you can tap the Dynamo for 3 mana, and have 4 mana floating for, more Voltaic Keys, more mana rocks. Basically, the key allowed you to just dump mana rocks into play like nothing. And this package allowed you to just ramp into huge, massive amounts of mana really fast. It was pretty crazy. And it should be noted that the same concept would also win the World Championship the following year in the form of Mono Blue Tinker. We've already made a video on that deck, so you can check that out if you haven't already. Link in the description below. So anyway, big mana. This thing put out big mana. So let's go back to Wildfire. Wildfire destroys lands and creatures, right? But you know what it doesn't destroy? Artifacts, mana rocks. It doesn't destroy Therian Dynamo. It doesn't destroy Grim Monolith. It doesn't destroy Voltaic Key. So you see what this deck is doing? Basically, it would ramp into 6 mana super quick, cast Wildfire, destroy basically every land in play, including yours, probably destroy every creature in play, and then leaving the battlefield completely empty, except for your mana rocks. So now the opponent has to try to rebuild from scratch. Meanwhile, you've got a board full of mana, and that's when the deck pressed its advantage. So what did it use with all that mana? Well, it played Covetous Dragon, Masticore, and Karn Silver Golem. The dragon is obscenely powerful for the time. You didn't normally get creatures that were bigger than their mana cost, so a 6/5 flyer for 5 was pretty good actually. It does come with the drawback of requiring you to have an artifact in play, but that was fine because it had all the mana rocks. So basically, destroy the opponent's lands, wipe their board, play a big dragon, and start swinging. 5 mana 6/5 with flying is gonna end the game quick, especially on an empty board. Masticore is a 4 mana 4/4 with a pretty hefty drawback of forcing you to discard a card, but it allowed you to dump all that mana you were producing into wiping your opponent's board. It could also ping off, like say your opponent did have 1 land and like a 1-drop flyer, you could use Masticore to clear the board, ensuring that they have absolutely nothing after a Wildfire. And then there is Karn, a 5 mana 4/4 that becomes a 0/8 if it ends up in combat with another creature. So the important part here is that you can pay 1 mana to animate any artifact, turning it into a creature and giving it power and toughness equal to its mana cost. So this gave the deck another way to kill its opponent. Wipe the board with Wildfire, play Karn, and then turn mana rocks into an army of creatures to finish off the person you're playing against. Nice. The deck also played 2 copies of Mishra's Helix and Cursed Scroll. Mishra's Helix just allows you to pay X to tap X lands, and since you are producing so much mana so quickly, you could tap down all of your opponent's lands at the beginning of their upkeep to deny them the ability to, play Magic and have fun and cast the things. Sounds like fun. Cursed Scroll, on the other hand, just gave the deck a repeatable source of damage. It's basically pay 3 mana, tap it for a chance to deal 2 damage. That might not sound great, but this deck could activate it multiple times per turn with all the mana it was producing and with Voltaic Key. Plus your opponent was, playing with very limited resources because you were constantly board wiping and wiping out their lands, so it could just clean up small creatures too, which just made it very difficult for your opponent to get back into the game. Plus, just a repeatable source of damage like this can win, just those long grindy matches, which this deck could get into because it was looking to board wipe continuously. So just, all around pretty decent. And the final card in the deck was Temporal Aperture, which is kind of ridiculous. So you can pay 5 mana and tap it to shuffle your library and then reveal the top card, at which point you can cast it at any time without paying its mana cost. Not only did it give this deck the ability to just constantly spin the Wheel of Fate once it ran out of cards in hand, but remember, mana rocks and Voltaic Keys. If you activate the Aperture and find a Grim Monolith, you can cast it for free and then tap it for more mana, possibly allowing you to untap the Aperture with Voltaic Key and possibly activating it again, and possibly finding another mana rock. Sometimes this thing could just churn through your deck and let you flood the board with all kinds of craziness. Like I said, it's just kind of ridiculous. And that's it. That's Wildfire. Pretty crazy. So taking a quick look at the mana base, it was very simple, just featuring 3 copies of Ancient Tomb, City of Traders, and 13 basic mountains. Both of the non-basics add 2 colorless mana, but come with a drawback. The tomb deals 2 damage, and the city has to be sacrificed if you play another land. But this is fine. You are really just looking to use these to catapult yourself into the realm of mana rocks and wildfires. So this was really all you needed. And taking a super quick look at the sideboard, as always, we won't go too in depth here as that requires an understanding of the entire metagame, but the sideboard contained 2 copies of Shattering Pulse and 2 copies of Rack and Ruin, both of which are great at blowing up your opponent's artifacts. It also played 3 Earthquakes and 4 Spell Shocks. Earthquake being a board sweeper that also deals damage to players, and Spell Shock really punishes people looking to cast a bunch of spells. The deck also played 2 copies of Boil if you hate the color blue, and an extra Mishra's Helix if you hate lands in general. And the final card in the sideboard was Phyrexian Processor. This is a whole thing, but basically you pay X life when it enters the battlefield, and then you start pumping out XX minion tokens. This can get pretty crazy, and as it happens, it would become the main deck centerpiece for the deck we mentioned earlier, Mono Blue Tinker, which won the World Championship in 2000. So again, you can find a link to that deck in the description if you want to know more about Phyrexian shenanigans. And that's the deck. That is Wildfire. Ramp into big mana, wipe the board with Wildfire, and then press your advantage with big creatures while your opponent desperately tries to recover. Pretty cool, but yeah. There you go, guys. That's the deck. The deck that won the Magic the Gathering World Championship in 1999. Now, you are a little bit more familiar with Magic the Gathering's history and another classic deck from the early days of the game. If you want to see more World Championship decks like this, I have a playlist full of them, and you can find a link to that in the description below. Also consider subscribing, as there will surely be more to come in the future. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.